Welcome back, everyone, to just another day in the life of a military wife. This episode is going to be a little atypical because I really want to talk about some things I have been noticing generally in the military community, and it just reminded me of some experiences I had that are applicable, I feel, to society in general, just because of the last 2 years we've had. And mostly it's the importance of interconnectedness in our lives, especially this time of year, and how to do that, make it happen. Anyway, that said, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and this is Life of a Military Wife. Okay. So kind of already talked about this a little bit in the intro, but interconnectedness and the importance of basically relationships and connections have been really kind of something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Just because of the way things are in the world in general. But it got me thinking about how I grew up versus how my life has been, because we've been a military family and just this day and age when people tend to live further away from their families. So I know it's not the typical, like, not everyone grew up this way, but I was super blessed to grow up with my extended family super geographically close. I had cousins who went to the same schools as me growing up. They were in the same congregation. I got to spend almost, my extended family got together, my cousins, aunts, and uncles, almost every month. Sometimes more than once a month if there was a holiday. And we just did a ton together all the time. And when you have a super big family that's really close and gets together all the time, it's the typical craziness, and there's always going to be something going on. But it was this sense of community. I never really felt like I felt like I had a place, even if it was loud and there was lots of people and lots of opinions, and I really enjoyed it because it gave me a feeling of belonging. And on top of that, I had the blessing of knowing and hanging out with my second cousins. And most people don't hang out with or even know their second cousins. And so growing up with not only my first cousins, but my second cousins, and still even talking to them all today, I had this huge sense of family and community, because even just outside of that, we had our congregation that I grew up in. So I knew these kids my whole life, and we had this inside joke of this big family that we had created, of these families that kind of just helped take care of each other and watch out for each other and had each other's back. And I remember my best friend's mom, she was a stay-at-home mom, and she was kind of like a neighborhood mom to some of us kids. So my mom worked, and I remember when my little brother got chicken pox, my mom couldn't take it off work. So he just went over to her house because her son had chicken pox too. And they had little chicken pox, party hanging out while they got over chicken pox. Or there was a time that a repairman needed to come and fix something in our house, and my mom was at work and we were going to be all at school. So my friend's mom came over and she got bored, so she started cleaning our house, just random things like that. The sense of community and belonging. And contrast that with some of the experiences I've had as an adult, as a military spouse, as a mom now myself. We move so much. We live in places very far away from our families and these communities we grew up in. And I realized I was blessed to have that sense of community. And there has been times I really have lamented that my children don't have that consistent sense of community or that proximity to family that I had. My husband grew up with a different situation. He had a big family of siblings, and he did some things with his cousins sometimes, but he barely knew his first cousins, and he didn't hardly know any of his second cousins. So it was a more, I guess, what I feel is a typical situation than what I had. But I remember our first Christmas with our first kid, it just being the three of us alone on Christmas Day. And it was just felt so lonely and so just, it was really, really hard to just know that all of the family was getting together and we were in another state, so we just couldn't be there. And how many years that has happened. And I remember trying desperately to recreate these big family holidays by inviting friends from my husband's unit over or people from our congregation over. But there wasn't always people who wanted to come over. And there wasn't always, it's just sometimes you're new to an area and you don't have anyone to do something with. And that's happened to us on multiple occasions. And so it's been hard to balance that desire for interconnectedness, but accept that it's going to take a while to build quality relationships and that every time we move, we're going to have to start over again. And that kind of gets into this whole, last 2 years that we've had. Because I'm very involved with our congregation, I've had the blessing of getting to know families that have tried to transition to a new duty station in the middle of this. And it's been hard for them to get involved and get to know the community because so many organizations were shut down for so long. And now that these organizations are opening up, they are struggling because a lot of the people who used to be involved and volunteer and just do these things have moved away and gone on to new duty stations or gotten out of the military or whatever. And so they're struggling to find people to replace those that they had before. And new people are struggling to find ways to connect because everything was shut down when they got here. Mm-hmm. So, and that just got me thinking about, in general, we as human beings, we just need this connection. And because, again, it's my passion. I like understanding how people work and the research and stuff behind it. I was looking into this and I ran into a research study that was done, and it was done over a period of 10 years. It was published in the 90s by Waite in 1995. And it, that's a different study. Sorry. This one was Berkman and Breslow in 1983, but it was over a 10 years period. It was in Alameda County, and it showed that the greater involvement people had in formal organizations and informal organizations, so with these social ties, that it was associated with more positive health behaviors. And then in other studies, they were showing that these more positive health behaviors could increase people's lifespans, help with medical conditions, all sorts of stuff. And it got me thinking how, as human beings, we're not meant to be alone. We're not meant to kind of just exist in our own little bubble. And sometimes that happens. It happens for lots of reasons. We've experienced one of them in this last few years, and some of it's because sometimes we move away from those communities and connections that we have. And so regardless of the reason why we sometimes find ourselves isolated and alone, or in a situation where we may not have a support system like we normally would, it's important for us to continue to look for those things because we need it. Physiologically, we need it. Psychologically, we need it. And social media, as wonderful as it is, it's just not the same. Another one of the researchers studies I was looking at was talking about like actual human contact, a hug, a smile, a handshake, things that sometimes people are intimidated by now because of, everything, but how important they are to our mental well-being and our emotional well-being. And I, again, thinking about all this stuff, all this going on in my head, I was just like, how am I going to communicate this in a way that makes sense and is not rambly? And I started thinking about, how do we fight this? How do we combat this isolationism, this individual isolationism that has been thrust upon us? And the technology doesn't always improve it. Sometimes it exacerbates the situation. And as this was all like swirling through my head, I'd been asked to participate in a district level meeting for my kids' schools about accountability, curriculum, all that sort of stuff. And one thing they were talking about is how hard it is to engage with parents with everything that has gone on. Parents are just not as involved. Several of the schools and other people were talking about how PTAs have really suffered. A lot of these other academic situations have suffered. Getting parents to volunteer has just declined. And I've talked with other organizations that I interact with, and they are struggling to find volunteers, to get people involved, to get people to come to activities or events. And that really kind of just struck me because, honestly, I am, as my husband will attest, a ridiculously social person. Like, I kind of just live off of social interaction. I need people. I need people. I love being around people. It recharges my battery. I'm an extrovert. I am a total extrovert. And so getting back involved in life and doing things has been amazing for me and for my mental health and for my emotional well-being. I've just been super happy and gung-ho. And so to see that, to be like, okay, so where's the disconnect? Why are some people struggling? And I don't really know. I don't have the answers to all of that. But I do know that it's important for people to get involved. And I do remember how isolated I felt when we were a young family and we had one vehicle and I was at home all day with little kids in a state far away from family, and I was new to the area and didn't really have a lot of friends. It was a struggle. It was really an emotional and mental struggle. And I am so grateful for the connections I made through my congregation, through my husband's unit, and just because I feel like at my biggest struggle, when I was just really feeling it the most, the people that reached out to me and threw me a lifeline and became my friends and helped me through that, those are relationships I still cherish and love. And as much as I am an extrovert, I really struggle when I get to a new place throwing myself out there. Like, I'm the kind of person who I feel most comfortable in a social situation if I know I have a wingman. And when you first get somewhere, you don't always have a wingman. And so it takes me a little while to get to that point where I'm comfortable being my assertive, outgoing self. And so I'm grateful for the people who've reached out for me. But if you're finding yourself in that situation right now, I was thinking, what's some advice I could give to some young mom who's in the same situation I am, or, anyone who's going through that feeling of being alone. And the first thing that came back to me was unplug. And I know that that is going to sound kind of odd because I use media to communicate with people. But binge watching Netflix, as enjoyable as it is not going to meet that need. And Facebook and social media, Twitter, all of those things, yes, well, they will allow us to peripherally and in a very shallow way almost keep track of what's going on with people's lives that we know. It doesn't replace actual connection. So there's a value to actually having a conversation with someone. To even, I mean, you can use technology to have some of those conversations, especially if you're far from friends. A phone call, a video call, those are great ways of doing it. But there's also a time where you just need to see someone in person. And I had those moments when I was a young mom and I was just struggling. And I remember my husband, I think he was out of town with a training, or he was in the field or something like that. And it was late at night and I was exhausted and I'd got the kids to bed and I just felt really just sad and just lonely. And then all of a sudden I got a knock at my door, and people don't usually come over to my house late at night because they know I've got kids that I'm trying to keep in bed. And at that point I had a baby. And so I was like, what is this? And I almost didn't go to my door at all because I was worried it was like someone pulling a prank or some stranger. But I did. And the person at the door was some friends from church. It was just some friends from church, and they had felt like they needed to just come see and how I was doing. And there were missionaries that were serving in our congregation, missionaries anyway. And they were just two young girls, and they're super sweet college-age girls that were just dolls. I absolutely loved those girls. And they're like, we just had a feeling like we should see how you were doing. And they just came in and we had a great talk, and I was able to get a hug, and I just needed a hug so bad. And I was just so grateful for them for thinking of me. And so I'm grateful for that community I had. And there was another time I was at church, and a lady in another congregation in our same building saw me, and she's like, you just look like you need a hug. And she came up and gave me this hug, and it was the best hug. It was just great. It was one of those really firm, just wonderful hugs. I love hugs. I'm a hugger. With people I know, I'm a hugger. And I've come to realize that getting involved has really helped me overcome the sense of loneliness and loss that I felt with having to be removed from that community I grew up in and that large, loving, extended family that I had close at hand. And so back to ways that we can actually address that feeling. And like I said before, unplugging, actually looking face to face to someone is crucial. Volunteering, there are a lot of organizations on a lot of the different duty stations that need assistance right now. There are thrift stores, YMCAs, USO, MWR, the different sports teams. I was so excited. My kids got to play sports again this last summer. It was great. The schools are really desperately needing people. I had to kind of decide between being on the curriculum committee and being on the PTA, and I picked the curriculum committee. Everyone picked the curriculum committee. We have no PTA at my kids' schools. Like, how insane is that? But I can't do everything, so I really have to pick and choose. Church organizations, meeting your neighbors, those sorts of things, it can be hard to get out there and get to know new people. There's a trend I have started to see on some of the spouses pages where people will post like a almost I don't know if you guys, maybe I'm dating myself way too much, but like people would place personal ads in the newspaper like looking for friendship, looking for this or looking for that in days gone by. And not exactly to the same extent, I've seen quite a few military spouses post, hey, I'm new to this location. Here's a little bit about me or my family and blah, 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 blah. I'd like a friend. And you know what? It's being proactive, so good on you. If that's all you've got, go for it. The other thing we've done is try to have neighbors over for dinner, or we've gotten involved with some of the different clubs at our local library. My kids particularly love the Lego club at our library. And we've met people there. I've tried to get involved with the Spanish club because I speak Spanish. They really, very kind women because they put up with me. I'm the only native English speaker in the group. And I'm really grateful to be able to speak with so many native Spanish speakers because it's helped me not lose what I know. If you don't use it, you lose it. So, but it's just that whole concept of finding a new community. I'm so grateful I was able to learn Spanish because I have found that every place we have lived, there is a Spanish community that just is waiting to like love you. And the Hispanics that we have known, the members of the Spanish communities where we've lived, are just some of the most loving, kind, welcoming, just friendly people I have ever met in my life. And I've been blessed to make friends with so many of them. So there's just a lot of different opportunities, and it's just being proactive. It's intimidating to get out there and do it, but there's blessings for doing it. And if you don't know where to start, maybe get involved with your units, your spouse's units, SFRG, FRG, soldiers, airmen, alphabet soup, the family group, and see if they need volunteers. I was really intimidated to get involved at first as a new military spouse because I had no idea what I was getting myself into, really, and I didn't feel like anyone would care what I thought. But over the last few years, I've had the blessing of getting to know some people who have helped me see the value of being involved in my husband's unit. And I've come to really enjoy the friends and people I've gotten to know through that. I like working with our chaplain and our chaplains association. There's a lot of really wonderful people I've met through that. So you don't have to do all of the things that I do. You don't have to do any of those things. But if you are feeling lonely, if you are feeling isolated, if you are wanting to make a friend, find one of those organizations and reach out. Take that step to look for someone. We have to kind of put our big girl pants on and be proactive, and it can be daunting, but it is very worth it. So again, I'm not completely sure why I felt driven to share this thought process I've been having with everyone, but it just, every time I've tried to think about a different topic to share this week, this just kept coming back. And I think just because it's something so close to my heart, because I've had those moments where I have felt isolated and by myself. Because it happens. And I want you to know that it doesn't have to be that way, that you don't have to feel alone. And I hope this helps, especially at this time of year. And with that said, you are listening to Life of a Military Wife, And I am your host, Sam Wolf.